Welcome back to jamplay.com, and of course I'm Mark Brennan. This is lesson 7 of my basic electric guitar series. Glad you could join me. Hope you're enjoying the lessons we're doing so far. Today we're going to continue on with, we're going to build on what we learned in lesson 6, which was the natural notes in the first position, and we're going to go ahead and learn our first scale. Okay, hope you're not too intimidated with that, but you actually know all the notes you need to know for several scales actually. But we're going to do C major today, so we'll talk about C major. We'll touch a little bit on major scale construction, and then we'll go over the C major scale in the first position, give you a couple exercises. We'll talk about using the scale for making melodies and improvising. So we'll take a break here and we'll get right to it. Okay, so we're talking about C major in the first position. Now, I think what we'll do now is we'll talk about the construction of a major scale. Now, there's many scales that you're going to learn in the course of your study with guitar, but the major scale is probably the first and the most basic. Certainly a widely used scale in the composition of music. The scale is the basis for melodies and chords, and song in a major key will use the major scale and the chords that are built off the scale. So what we're going to do basically is just show you how the scale is built up with the makeup of whole steps and half steps. Now, as we've stated before, on the guitar fretboard, a half step is 1 fret. Okay, so C to C sharp is a half step. E to F is a half step, an open string to the first fret. The open B to C is a half step also. Okay, so the major scale has a certain series of whole steps and half steps that you need to learn, and you need to learn how the scale sounds too. Now, the easiest way to do that would be to do it up one string, because it's real easy to visualize the whole steps and half steps. Okay, so let's start with the C on the 3rd fret of the 5th string. Now, the construction of a major scale is this. We start with a whole step to D, and then we do another whole step. And then this is our first half step. Okay, so there's that E to F half step. So again, we start with the root note, C, whole step to D, whole step to E, and then half step to F. Next, we move on to another whole step, and half step. Now, basically, we can break the scale down to 2 segments, and each segment consists of a whole step, half step. Okay, then I'm going to go another whole step, and we'll do another whole step, half step. Now, in music theory, we call those the 2 tetrachords, or the 4-note segments. Now, this is important when you're learning other scales and you're learning the circle of fifths, that these tetrachords kind of connect with each new scale around the circle of fifths. So again, the C is C, whole step to D, whole step to E, half step to F. Then we go another whole step to G, whole step to A, whole step to B, and half step to F. Now you can go anywhere on the fretboard and use this whole step, half step makeup, start at any note, and that'll be considered the root note, and you can construct a major scale up and down the neck. But what we're going to do in the next segment is we're going to take that C major scale and put it all in first position for you. But I just thought it's real nice graphically to see how a scale is built going up one string. Whole step, half step, whole step, half step, and there's your C major. Okay, so let's stop here, and then next segment we'll check out the C major scale in the first position. Be right back. Okay, we're back with C major. Now we're going to take the C major construction we just talked about and put it down in the first position. Now, you might want to go back and review all your natural notes in the first position that we talked about in the last lesson. These notes are all in the C major scale. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start with, we'll call that the root note, or the single letter note name of the scale that we're playing. So we're going to start on the C. We're going to go all the way up to the high A, which we learned, and then down to the low E, and then back up to the C. Okay? And then you'll hear how the C major scale sounds in the first position. So I'm going to play a C chord. Okay, and then we'll start with the C. Then we play the open D. Now that's a whole step to D. Now you saw in the last segment how we played the D here. That's the same pitch as your open fourth string. Okay, so we go whole step to D, whole step to E. Now there's our E, F half step on the fourth string. That's that first half step in the scale. Then we go whole step to G, whole step to A, now whole step to B, and then B to C is a half step. Okay, there's our first octave. Now we can take it up to the A, whole step to D, whole step to E, half step to F, whole step to G, whole step to A. Okay, now this is the last note that we learned in the position, so we're going to descend now, back down to the G, to the F, there's your E, D, there's our tonic note C, going to descend down one more octave, there's your A, G, F, E, D, and then C. Now we're going to go all the way down to the low E. We got the B, A, G, F, the low open E, back up to the F, to the G, A, B. Now let's do it in rhythm now. 2, 3, 4, 2. Now play it nice and smooth and connected like we talked about, legato. Stretch to the A. There's your tonic note. Here's our root note. Then we're going to go down to the low notes that we know, all the natural notes. And then our C. Okay, so there's C major in the first position. Okay, now we'll take a break here. We'll come back and I'll show you a nice little exercise that'll give you a nice little finger workout, and it'll give you a different perspective of the C major scale. Thanks. Okay, so you probably are beginning to recognize the sound of this scale now that we're playing it. I refer to it as the do-re-mi scale to a lot of my students. It's the do-re-mi fa sol la ti do. Okay, and it ascends and descends. There's a root note that you start at, you go up to the root note, and you come back down to the root note. That's basically one octave of the C major scale. But what we did was we extended it to all the different notes that we know in the position. Okay. Now, again, a scale, what is it used for? What is it all about? What's the importance of learning it? Well, it's the building blocks for music composition and improvising. That's what it's all about. I mean, a melody they're using some kind of scale, whether it's a minor scale, whether it's a pentatonic scale, all the different scales, there's numerous scales to choose from as a composer to write a melody. And then from that scale, you not only construct melodies, but you harmonize the scale to get the chords for that particular key. And we'll see how that works as we start talking about chords in a particular key. There's particular chords that are in the key of C. You're going to see that in coming lessons. Okay, so Might seem kind of a elementary, rudimentary task for you to work on these scales, but it's really important for you to learn how to play the scale on the guitar, learn how the scale sounds, and then be creative with the scale. What I want you to do is, after you've practiced these scales and exercises and you've played Somewhere Over the Rainbow and you played Orally, to maybe get your creative juices going and create your own melodies and even improvise a little bit with the scale, just to get a feel for the musicality of the whole thing. Okay, hope that makes sense. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to present a different type of rendering of the scale where we're going to do it in thirds. Okay, in other words, we're going to skip a note, we're going to go up to a third from the root, and then we're going to follow the same pattern up and down the scale. Okay, so if you look at your supplementary material, it's on this page. After I have the whole scale, we have this exercise. So basically, we start with the root note, the C, and then we're going to go to E. Okay, and so we're going to skip the D and go to the E. Then we'll go back to the D, skip the E, and then go to the F. So that's pretty much the pattern. Back to the E, up to the G, back to the F, and then up to the A. Back down to the G, then up to the B. The A, then the C. So this is an exercise in thirds. Now don't worry about what that means. We'll talk about intervals somewhere down the line. But this is a good finger exercise, and it's a different perspective of the scale too. Now we're going to descend in the same fashion. We'll go down a third, back up, down a third, back up to the E, down a third to the C, up to the D, down a third to the B, and so on. And this is a good finger exercise too. And it gets you more comfortable with the scale and the position. Another good thing to do would be to name the notes as you go up and down. Name the notes. C, A, B, G, A, F, G, E, F. We're going to go back up to the A, down to the G, B, and C. Now let's do it again. A little faster. Again, make it musical. Connect the notes. Play smooth and legato. Think of relaxing your left hand. Now we're going to descend back down. Think about your left hand position. We talked about that quite a bit already. You got to keep an eye on your left hand, make sure it's in the position it should be. Now I'm going to go ahead and repeat this in eighth notes. All the way down to the E. Okay, so that's a good finger exercise. Helps you learn the notes better. Try to say the names of the notes as you do this, as just practice to learn the note names. Okay, so we'll come back for one more segment. We'll talk about building melodies and improvising, and then we'll wrap up. Thanks. Okay, so we've been talking about C major. Hope you're getting the feel for it, getting it under your fingers, getting it into your ears, getting a real good comfortable feel for the scale. Now we talked about we use scales for building melodies, being creative, improvising. Okay, so what I encourage my students to do is to be creative with what they've learned. Okay, so I have my C major scale. Let's just try to make a melody. Now, a lot of it's experimentation. You know the notes, and you know what's going to sound good and what's not going to sound good. Okay, so I could try something like this. A good starting point would be the tonic note. Real simple melodies. Now you'll know when you hit a bad note. Okay, you know that note's not in the scale. I did that purposely. But you should have the scale in your ears and you know what it sounds like. So let's... Okay, now hopefully I had that on a tape recorder where I was recording that because I might play that back and that might sound good. That might be good for a vocal melody or a melody with a solo instrument where I harmonize with chords. Okay, and I can just have fun with improvising. You know, it would be good to do this with a backing track with a particular chord progression, but I'll just kind of noodle around the scale and improvise a little bit using the notes of the scale. Now, I'm using a lot of advanced techniques, as you can probably see, but I'm using the notes in C major. Okay, so be creative and have fun with it. Okay, so that about does it with the C major scale. Have fun with it, experiment with it, be creative with it, get it under your fingers, and we'll be back to wrap up this lesson and let you know what's in store for our next lesson. Thanks. Okay, so that wraps up our lesson on C major in the first position. We went over a lot of stuff. We went over the whole scale. We learned some exercises with it. We talked about the construction of a major scale, and we even improvised on it. So you keep practicing that, get a real good feel for the C major scale. Go back and review. Go back and review all the notes in your first position. Keep doing those right hand exercises that we learned in the previous lesson. Get that right hand control going. Hopefully when you play the C major scale, you'll be hitting all the proper strings. You'll be getting that good pick control going. And be creative, have fun with it. write your own melodies, jam around with it, just noodle around with it and be creative with it. And then since we've learned our first scale, what we'll do is on our next lesson we'll start learning our first two chords. We'll learn a chord pair. We'll learn the construction of the chords, how they're fingered on the fretboard, and how to move from one chord to the next. Okay, so that's what we'll do the next time. So till then, I'm Mark Brennan. You're on jamplay.com, and we'll see you real soon.